What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Pro v Pro. Pretty eventful week in the golf world. How are you doing, Justin?
Good, man. Yeah, it was more than eventful for probably reasons that it shouldn't have been, but it's all right.
And you have some trash talk that you deserve to be able to send my way from the NBA streets.
Yeah, I was just giving you grief about the Mavericks going to Philly last night, but obviously you don't have your best player, so there's really not too much to talk about. And I'll be honest, like I'm definitely a Mavericks fan, but until it really becomes playoff game time, I really don't pay much attention. We just had the night off, kid sports wise, and I was like, you know what, I'll watch the Mavs.
That's how I am with the Flyers. It's been a little while since I've been able to actually pay attention to them because of that, but maybe this year, who knows? But yeah, crazy week in golf. I guess the best place to start is, did you watch any of the live event, especially on Sunday, with no PGA Tour to watch?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because everybody thinks that I'm like this huge live guy and PGA Tour hater, which I simply believe that the competition that live has brought on is really, really good for everybody. I've not watched a bunch of live in the past. And I often wonder if it's because we focus so much around the PGA Tour and betting on the PGA Tour, and DraftKings contests are better around the PGA Tour, not live. Or does maybe the shotgun format play into our decision to choose to bet on the PGA Tour over live? That's the only question I really had. But yeah, absolutely. I love it. I saw a bunch of complaining about, oh, how do you watch this with music in the background? And I do think that it's a little bit obnoxious at times. Like there's certain times that they go too far with it. But I think the PGA Tour really messed up this week and gave live an opportunity they were looking for.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with that, but I also think there's nothing they could have done about Sunday. There's no way they could have played golf on Sunday.
Okay, so I agree, but not for the reasons they said. So they came out and said that they were just saying, oh, the course is unplayable, you can't keep the ball on the greens, blah blah. If the PGA Tour would have just come out and said, they have plenty of media outlets, and said, hey, we have trees down, we have towers down. The city is kind of in shambles with stuff. It's just not feasible. Then I think you get a lot more of, especially guys like me who are kind of critics, knowing that we've played in worse than that, and they had prepared the golf course to be played in that condition. I would have been a lot less critical about it. But it's just it's disappointing that they're can't just be honest. Hey, there's a bunch of trees down. Like we can't do this. So.
Yeah, it was a weird one. We were pretty active on Twitter on Sunday, kind of criticizing the tour, and I do think there was a lot to criticize the tour about. My angle was more that, why were we so in the dark about it? Like, coming from somebody who's played a million events on the Pennsylvania golf circuit and Gap of Golf Association of Philadelphia, I feel like, whether or not I was actually a player in those events, I was getting better updates from them than I do from the PGA Tour. Why is that the case? It's not like they have less of a reach or that they have fewer people working the social media accounts to be able to get out that information, things of that nature. So I just felt like we were too in the dark, to the point where we didn't know, like, what was the PGA Tour doing in terms of preparation looking forward. Not what were they doing Sunday when they were trying to get on the course. What were they doing Saturday and Friday, Thursday, to look forward to that and say, okay, we know that this awful weather is coming on Sunday. How do we get 72 holes of golf in? I don't think they did everything they could have done to make that a 72-hole event.
Well, and they even said they didn't mow on Saturday just in case it got windy, right? That's why you don't mow the greens, is to make sure that the ball sits still. Like you said, right now they need to try to retain their fan base and keep people from trying live, and they did a very bad job doing that. And it's just a simple business tactic of communication. Mm-hmm. One interview out there in the clubhouse from somebody saying, hey, we've got to cancel today. Here's down trees, down towers. As far as the course, we could maybe get the course ready, but we can't get all of this other stuff cleaned up. Mackenzie Hughes said, hey, dude, there was trees down. trees down everywhere. Why are we finding out from other players having to defend the PGA Tour instead of the PGA Tour just running this like an honest business?
Yeah, I saw a couple videos from players. One was from Ben Griffin. I can't remember who did the other one. The other one was really funny, where a guy was like standing outside and he started to say, "Oh, it's not that bad. We could play." And then the wind got so loud that you couldn't hear everything else that he said. So certainly, like, to your point, any sort of thing like that, where you're not finding a video from a player on his social at 6 p.m., but they're actually sending that out early in the day, making it clear, is that would be helpful for us fans. And it's not like we are owed anything. It's just, why would you not go the extra length to make sure your fans understand and know what's happening? So we're not just like sitting around wondering all day long, do we get to watch golf today, or should I go play some golf? Anything like that. So I'm with you. I thought they could have done things a lot better, even though it's obviously not their fault that the weather got so bad they couldn't actually play on Sundays.
It just shows you how not serious they are about the fan retention and running this like a business, to where everybody can be profitable and make money. And to run a successful business, you can't treat your fans, your followers like that. And so so people they're going to go tune into Live because there was literally, it might have been the slowest sports day of the year. I mean, it's in the conversation of no sports, and everybody was going to watch Pebble, and now they all watched Live.
I think that gets to one of the big kind of question marks about the PGA Tour right now, and in this entire like debacle with Live and everything, is the players have a ton of leverage over the tour. They've shown that. They've gotten these designated events. They've got no cuts, things of that nature. They have gotten so much from this. The fans haven't quite gotten much yet, right? Like we're still getting pretty commercial heavy broadcasts. We're not seeing as many golf shots as we want. We're not seeing enough of the other golf courses, like when, it's round 1 or round 2 at Pebble, and we're seeing very little Spyglass. We're not getting Shot Tracker on those other courses. Still, it's like we're still waiting to see, all right, lots happening for the players. When is it the fans benefit? And to some players' credits, Max Homa and Colin Morikawa both spoke up about that this week. Morikawa mentioned the broadcasts directly, basically saying like, hey, when I play, Thursday morning, I want to turn the golf on in the afternoon. I'm seeing very few shots. Why is that? And things of that nature. So I was really, really happy to see that at least 2 of the bigger names in golf are not just speaking up about it, but that they're actually recognizing it, because I think to some degree, a lot of the players maybe didn't even realize how unhappy the fans were with the way the golf is covered.
Well, it's just the lack of leadership inside the PGA Tour. Like, it shows itself time and time again, because the players, all they're looking out for is themselves and their own brand. And all the players that are getting what they want have already made it, right? They're not, they don't need anything else. They just want things better for them, which I get. But if you have any leadership on the PGA Tour, just be like, hey, dude, we can't do that right now. Here's why. This is our plan, how we're going to grow. We want more shots on TV. We want better everything all the way around. And they don't have anybody that seems capable of providing any leadership, whether it be to the media, to the players, to the fans. There's just such a disconnect. And literally the first thing that everybody posts on Twitter after watching 10 minutes of Live is like, man, it's crazy how many shots we get to see hit.
Yeah, I even saw, so I have not watched any of a Live broadcast yet. It's not like I'm boycotting it or anything. I just can't get myself interested enough to actually turn it on. But I did watch a few clips on social, just of like, hey, this is why I like the Live broadcast. Look how many shots you see in this 2.5 minute clip. And to your point, you actually see a hell of a lot more shots. We know it can be done. It's been done for years on the DP World Tour broadcasts. So it's like any conversation from the tour about like, oh, we'd love to show more golf shots, but the logistics of it are just really difficult. It's hard to get that many cameras in position, things of that nature. That's all crap. Like this is just a choice for how they are broadcasting the sport, and it needs to change. And to your point about a lack of leadership, like that's why I was so happy to see Morikawa and Homa talk about it, because that's the first like really good points of leadership that I've really seen from players acknowledging what the sport means to the fans and how it can better reach the fans. I think it was Morikawa who even called out the fact that, like, look, for too long, we have talked about growing the game and just using that as like a very clear shell for the fact that we want more money. And people are tired of hearing how much money that golfers are making. And it's time in, like, if we actually want to grow the game, the way to do that is through an improvement in the broadcast. When someone turns on a broadcast and they see 3 golf shots and 2 commercials in 15 minutes, are they more or less likely to keep watching golf for the next few hours than if they saw 20 golf shots from all the players they want to see? So
And
perhaps
it goes
some hope.
well, and it goes even further than that, because let's be honest, if we did watch Pebble on Sunday, and let's say that it was decent weather, that it wasn't like that, they would show who, like maybe your final group or two, and then you would get this random 50-footer by a guy that's 1 over that goes in. And literally when they tune it in, when they put the camera on, you're like, oh, he's 3 over for the day, 1 over for the tournament. Guess this goes in. I guess he chips in here. Way to go.
And not only that, but they're saying from a moment ago. It's like,
Yeah.
you're not going to say that if he curls it up to 2 feet.
Yeah.
Why are you giving away the answer?
Yeah. And so it's just like, they don't, for something that's such a strong entity in our sports world, they just seem kind of lost right now.
Yeah. Which honestly, like, if you want a silver lining in it, it's that as bad of a job as they have done, golf is still becoming more popular. Like the love of the sport, I think you could argue, has never been higher. And so the energy's there. If they do turn this around, if they do give us a better product, there's almost no ceiling on how great the golf world can become.
Well, so I don't think it's really become public, but the word is they're having a live event in Dallas at one of the courses that I've got a very good friend that's a member at.
Mm-hmm.
I hope they set the golf course up the way they can, because you will not complain about them not playing hard golf courses. But if they do, I'm going to go. Like, I would love to go sit and experience it and just see what it's like in person. We have a couple of members at our club that went to the one in Chicago last year, and they said it was great, and this makes sense. And the fact that their day was done in like 6 hours, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they showed up, watched everybody hit a few balls, went and sat in their whatever their hole was on, they were on, and just watched. They got to see every single player. Mm-hmm. So they just sat there and hung out and walked. Yeah, I mean, I get some people want to walk around, but how many people run to Augusta to a spot, put their chair down, and don't move for the entire day? It's a lot. Imagine just sitting there and watching every single group come through. So there's a part of that makes a lot of sense. How do we make that better for us, really, on the gambling side of things and stuff like that? I don't know the answer, and I don't know why. I don't know if it's the lack of depth that DraftKings, or it's just the money that the DraftKings already given the PGA Tour, and that's why they don't want to open too much up to live.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. It brings me to the question of, do you think that Liv is doing a disservice to themselves with all the music, things of that nature, and the shotgun start included, where like they're in this battle for official world golf rankings points so that their players can get into majors and all that stuff, and yet then they like make themselves look a hell of a lot less serious than they could with a shotgun start, with EDM music blasting for most of the round.
The 54 hole is why they don't have the
54 holes as well.
That's the one that's the main reason, right? They don't have world golf ranking points. So the shotgun start doesn't have anything to do with it, I don't think. I could be wrong.
I don't know the exact answer to it. I just think there's just like a less serious vibe because of that, and maybe it all feeds together somehow.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that the ranking points come down to the 54 hole event over the 72. And you know, I saw an interesting point too, that this is a rare instance where you can have it both ways. Like, we can all sit here and say they should get world golf ranking points, because they should, but we can also have it the way of like, Neiman should not be complaining that he doesn't get them, because he knew when he made this decision to go that he wasn't going to get them. So this is a rare occasion that you can see that both sides are acceptable.
Well, I also think it's an important point that, like, maybe originally it was fair to say, hey, they deserve world golf rankings points, they should be getting them. and it's the fault of the official World Golf Rankings that they're not. But once the official World Golf Ranking says, hey, you're just not meeting the requirements, all you have to do is play 72 holes instead of 54.
Yeah.
And you continue to choose not to, at that point, it's on you. You just have to make this small adjustment to meet the requirements, and then you get the rankings points, and you're just spitting in the place of your players saying, no, it's their fault. It's not ours, but we're going to leave the format exactly as it is, keeping you from getting these points that you want so badly.
And I'm surprised Norman hasn't done something like this where he's just like, we're going to have an open to the public meeting with our players. And we're going to sit down and go, hey, we can go to 72 holes and get World Golf Ranking points, or we can stay 54. Mm-hmm. We know it was a big draw to some of these players to come over and play 54 holes instead of 72. So which one do you want? I think so. I really do. I really believe that there are some players that thoroughly enjoy 54 over 72. And it may just be Dustin Johnson because he'd rather do other stuff. But you know what I mean? But there are some people that definitely.
I agree with you. I think that there are some players on Live who like playing 54 instead of 72. I don't think those 18 holes were the reason. I think it was the $20 million or the $400 million that were the reason they came over. Not, I really just want to play 18 fewer holes, and that's the deal breaker, the deal maker.
But that's my point, is like they could literally go have an open meeting and say, here's our dilemma. What side do we as a group want to make? And then you know what? All of a sudden the fans get behind them. The media, it draws the media attention they need. Like, it's just business decision. Like, quit complaining if you don't want to do anything about it.
Exactly. I wonder too if they're allowed to do something like maybe 3 or 4 of their events are 72 holes, all the rest are 54, and they get points for the 72 and not for the 54. Or is it that like you either get points for all of your tour's events or none of your tour's events? I don't know what the answer is.
And they could even say, hey, World Golf, whoever's in charge of the World Golf Ranking, whatever, say, hey, like, let's all have a meeting. Players, you guys, the PGA Tour, like, what do we and make that open to everybody. Like, if we want everybody to be honest, let's just get it all out there and say, hey, this is where we stand. Like, yeah, I just don't see why that's that hard. And I'm going to bag on the PGA Tour for one more second about one more thing. This deal with that Rio kid from Japan and Peter Malnati is absolutely obnoxious. Have you seen all this?
No, I have not.
So Peter missed the first 3 cuts, got a sponsor's exemption into Pebble, and finished 14th. The Japanese kid, he's made 3 cuts, 11th, 30th, 33rd, in on his number, and he's behind Malnati in FedEx Cup points. Like, that is an absurd system.
Yes, it is. The sponsor exemptions, I think, have been kind of messed up for a long time, where you either need to make it very clear that the sponsor exemptions are something that you earn through your play, or that the sponsor exemptions are just the sponsor doing whatever they can to make the most money they can, or is it just like a buddy system? It's, oh, you've become a friend of the tour for years or a friend of the event, we're going to give you the spot. But don't sell us on the idea that the sponsor exemptions exist to give exemptions to players who haven't qualified but have earned a spot through their play anyway, and then not give it to those guys like Rio.
Well, and that it's just like, and maybe if this is what they did, hats off to them, right? But if you're Peter and you've got, let's say you've done really good with the money you've made from the tour, and you've got $5 million, and Alex, you're the tournament director, and you're giving those away, and I am in danger of losing my status. Hey man, how about $500,000 for that sponsor exemption? Yeah. Now, obviously, the chances of me making that money back are, as a player, maybe not. I mean, I don't know what 14th paid, but it's not going to be much less than that. But you know what he just did? He just moved himself up into every single other event. Whether, I mean, probably not good enough to get in all the signature events, but now he's got all the tour starts he wants.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept. And I think like you could make a case that that's a good system because it would mean more money to the charities that the PGA Tour, I think they certainly advertise themselves as more philanthropic than they could be, or maybe even should be. But there's also no argument that the PGA Tour does do a lot of philanthropic work and they produce a lot of money for charities. So if you're going to produce more money through this sponsor exemption system, great. But also you can argue that's very unfair from a competitive standpoint, because it means that the young player, the up and coming player, the one who has earned his way into these events, gets kind of the wrong end of the deal because he hasn't had the time yet to earn the money where he can then get those sponsor exemptions.
And that's if you truly believe that like the tournament director for each tournament doesn't line his pockets in some way. Like I mean, I'm just not that naive to think that there's not somebody behind the scenes. It's like, hey, yeah, I'll get you in this, but I expect this, maybe not in this direct manner, but in some kind of indirect form of payment. I don't know. I'm just maybe too big of a critic when it comes to that kind of stuff. To think that it doesn't happen, I think would be asinine. And I'm not saying that it's every single person, that everybody does it, or that, that the whole world is evil. That's not what I mean. I just know that there has to be those talks. Like there's no way I just came up with that by myself and nobody else has ever thought of it, even as a player.
To your other point, also, it's like the part of the problem then is, why are you giving so many FedEx Cup points to an event that not everyone can get in, when this other guy has clearly played better and he didn't have one opportunity to play. And it's not like Malnati came out and finished 4th at Pebble, right? Like if you do that, all right, now you're beating so many of the best players in the world in this one event. Okay, to some degree, you maybe didn't earn your way into the event, but you at least then earned those FedEx Cup points in the play.
And this is no knock. This is like, I don't want people to think that we're knocking on Pierre Malnati in this deal.
Right.
It just so happens his name is the one that came out on the report that we saw.
Yeah.
Like what I'm not saying he's an incredible dude. Matter of fact, I've got a buddy that used to caddy for him on tour when he first got out there before he won. He's a great dude. This had nothing to do with a direct. We're not taking a stab at him in any kind of, we don't think he did anything wrong, or that's, I don't want that to be portrayed the wrong way, right? This is more about the flaw in the PGA Tour system.
Yeah. And particularly the FedEx Cup points, how they're handed out and how they get spots into events. Let's talk about what actually happened on the golf course at Pebble a little bit. Man, what a round from Wyndham Clark. And the kind of crazy thing is he had a chance to go just as low on Friday, because he started 4 under on the back, then turned to the front and was actually kind of disappointed with his front nine, where he had a chance to go nuclear then and shoot 62 in consecutive days, 60 in consecutive days, something like that. So what did you think of his performance at Pebble specifically?
Well, unfortunately, I didn't get to watch a lot directly on Saturday. We played 8 games between 2 kids, so it's not like there's a lot of sitting around. We started at 8 a.m. and got back at about 7 p.m. But I watched a bunch of the highlights. It looked like he putted well. It looked like he hit the ball well, hit it in a lot of the proper places. But he held a lot of putts. And from what I saw on the rebroadcast, it did look like the greens were a bit rough. Like, so when I played there before, 2 months ago, they were perfect. And so to me, just watching on TV, they looked like a lot of imperfections, obviously, because they were soaking wet and walking on them. I mean, that's what it was from. So what he did was pretty impressive. It's hard to hold that many putts on greens like that. So, and I'm talking about.
Let's pause for a second, because I don't think a lot of our listeners will understand exactly why they were as bumpy as they were, which is, number one, you have Poa greens, that kind of grass, just the way it grows in throughout the day. And the fact that they couldn't cut them because they were trying to let the greens slow down so that they were actually a little bit more playable on wind. So they were going to be a little bit uneven anyway. But then you get soft greens and you get people walking on those greens in spikes every single time someone steps, whether they, weigh 150 pounds or 250 pounds, they're going to make an imprint on the green. And that imprint's not really going to go anywhere, particularly if there's somebody else stepping on it the next 10 minutes, and the next 10 minutes, and the next 10 minutes. And so you just get these inevitable bumps on the greens that are going to play a role on every roll of the putt. Yeah,
and so not mowing Poa is really hard because, like you said, it's basically a weed. Like, it flowers throughout the day. So now you get 2 days of this, and so add the softness and that them talking about how soft they were, which you could see. And that's another thing I thought that. It's funny, I think we talked about this in the last show, but I thought Wyndham Clark did a really good job of controlling his spin.
Yeah.
So with no wind, it goes back to the same conversation of like you saw some of these guys hitting these shots that were just ripping back and they couldn't get them to stay around the hole. Whereas I felt like he did a little bit better job of that.
Definitely. I also felt like one of the concepts we're going to talk about this week at Scottsdale is these high leverage shots. And man, Wyndham, just the high leverage shots, he was awesome. Like his drive on 18 at Pebble, just phenomenal. I think he had like 218 in, and you're seeing everyone else in the field coming in with their second shot from 240 to 270, if they even hit a good one. Just a clinic all around on Friday and Saturday from him. And to your point, it's like he made a ton of putts, but even if you take away his strokes gained putting from those rounds, he still kind of laps the field just with his ball striking.
Yeah, and I mean he hit unbelievable good shots. I think my reference is like with the greens the way they were, still to make those putts from 5 to 10 feet, or like, and to make that many of them.
Did you see Maverick McNeely's kind of discussion about how to putt on bumpy greens and taking the high soft route?
I didn't.
So he talked about how, like, when you're on bumpy greens, the tendency for players and anyone out there listening, like, who plays bumpy greens more than amateurs, right? So when you have a bumpy green, the tendency is to say, oh, if this is going to bump offline, I'm going to try to take as straight of a route to the hole as I can, which means I'm going to hit it firmly and just hope that it doesn't break or bounce. And what McNeely is saying is when you have these bumps, a putt is going to bump downhill far more often than it bumps uphill. So what you want to do instead is actually take as high of a route as you can, as high of a line as you can, and hit it with the speed it's just going to die in. So every time it bumps, it's helping you get closer and closer to the hole instead of going firmly at the hole where each bump is more likely to hit it low and now you miss the putt down.
That's awesome. I agree 1,000,000%. I wish I'd have heard it. Yeah,
I wish I'd heard it.
That's just golf. Well, it's just golf IQ, right? We talk about that all the time. Just with the little things. What side of the tee box you put your tee in the ground? Like all kinds of stuff. And you hear all these people. The worst is, I know you've played in a charity scramble, and some dude's like, you leave one dead short right in the heart, and like, oh, if you don't get it there, you can never make it. And the next guy hits it 14 feet by, and it wouldn't have gone in if it hits dead center. You're like, which one really had a better chance to go in? So it's kind of the same idea. All the golf IQ stuff, I'm a huge golf IQ guy. I've never heard anybody say that. And to be honest, we talk about missing high a lot, so it kind of goes into that theory of thinking. But yes, that's a really good way to look at it. And I encourage everybody all the time to miss high anyway. And they're like, well, if you're not going to make it. And I was like, that's not it. It just teaches you proper speed, and you're just giving yourself a better chance.
100%. Yeah. And I think the other reason to try and miss high is the average amateur. If you think about a putt from like 20 feet away, the average amateur will read the putt. They will, in their mind, see like the apex of the break, the high point of it, and they'll aim at that high point, not realizing that to actually get to that high point, you have to start it even higher than that. So it's just another reason, like, where you think you should aim is more often than not higher than you expect.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, we can go pretty deep into this, but it comes all the way back to, like, if you have a 10-footer, would you rather have one that's like straight right edge or, 2 cups outside right? And you'll get so many different answers, and everybody has their own opinion. Yeah. And everybody's like, oh, obviously the straight one. Well, that's not the case at all.
Not always. Yeah.
So
I think it also depends on the player too. It's like if you're someone who struggles to read or align on a putt when it breaks that much, yeah, you probably want the straighter one. But if you're somebody who feels your alignment better and feels the read better than you can actually just like set it up straight, then you really want the putt that breaks. And then there's also the instance of like when a putt breaks, it forces you to pay a little bit more attention to speed. And so maybe you align the speed with the read a little bit better when it breaks more. Lots of stuff to it.
And we'll go one step further because I know we have listeners that play in 4-man scrambles all the time. If you have a 10-footer, you have 2 10-footers to choose from. Do not choose the uphill one. Choose the downhill one. You are going to hold the downhill one a million times more. Now, if you're playing individual golf and the greens are rolling a 13, obviously you want to hit the ball below the hole. You're trying to protect what you're doing. But if you're trying
It's
to
the
make
same
birdies,
concept as hitting into the wind versus downwind, right? When you miss your line by a little bit, a downhill putt, the slope, gravity will help it, like nudge it back online, if you will. Whereas an uphill putt, once it's slightly offline, guess what? Gravity's now taking it further offline. Just like when you hit downwind, a cut will straighten, a slice will straighten, and into the wind, a slice will just go off the entire world. So yeah,
and then putting has the grain involved too. So it's it's basically taking the wind analogy and doubling it because now you have grain as well. So yeah, I love that from Maverick, and I'm happy to hear somebody that's open to like say, hey, this is what we're thinking and why. And I mean, I guarantee you, anybody with the greens as slow as they were up there, they were not afraid to hit their ball above the hole.
I can also pretty much guarantee you that somebody in the field who had previously really struggled on Poe greens heard that comment from McNeely and was like, oh, I got to try that this week. And maybe they even had better success on the greens this week. Someone who didn't have more success on the greens this week was Scotty Scheffler. He was a little bit better, but still missed a handful of putts that he should have made, particularly on Saturday. When he was in position at the start of the day. Obviously he didn't expect Wyndham to go out there and shoot 60, but he probably should have been a lot closer to the lead than he was come the end of Saturday. And yet it was another top 10 for him. What's your take on Scotty now? Do you consider him the best in the world still? Do you feel like he's in line to win a bunch this year, or does he still just need to figure out the putting, or it's going to get worse before it gets better?
Slow greens expose bad putters. That's all there is to it. Like you have to hit better putts on slower greens. So and especially a guy like Scotty, who's never really been an overly aggressive putter. Anyway, I watched it and there was never any that I was like, oh, I can't believe that, or it just kind of fits the bill, and it fits the bill of why he should play so good in Phoenix, because now we get all his good stuff, and the bad stuff they're gonna get perfect overseeded rolling 12 greens in Phoenix.
For some context here, he did make a few putts on Saturday, but he had 4 putts where he lost at least half a stroke with a miss. If you make those, all of a sudden he's 17 under, tied with Wyndham Clark. Instead, he ties for 6th, 4 back. A couple of those putts were really bad misses, like 12 and 14 putts you just absolutely have to make when you're in contention, particularly because he had hit the ball so well on those holes. Like he gives himself these great opportunities on holes that, particularly on 14, like yes, some of the field is making those birdies, but man, 12's not a birdie hole. And yet he gives himself an opportunity. Those are the holes that are the reason why he's done so damn well on difficult golf courses the last couple of years, where he's birdieing holes that the rest of the field is just struggling to make par on. And right now he's not making those birdies. He's still giving himself the opportunities. Arguably, he's giving himself even more opportunities on those holes. He's just not converting.
Yeah, and it becomes disheartening too, right? If you he knows he's got to make those to get in contention, or at least think. I mean, he knows that there's some low scores, and you hit so many good shots, and it just becomes like, oh, why can't I make this? And I would classify myself as an above average putter, and it happens the same thing to me, right? I mean, like you get to go in and hit a bunch of good shots, you miss it, and then you hit one bad shot and make a bogey, and you're like, what just happened? Yeah. So I mean, it's just mentally hard as well.
It's what happened to Justin Thomas last year, right? It's like he started missing putts more and more consistently. It became more and more of an issue, and the next thing you know, that struggle seeps into his long game. And he's just not the same player for an entire year. He seems to have played his way back. I think he's back to being an elite player. He's back to being the Justin Thomas that we know and love. So there's a path back to it. But I think the major concern for Scotty in my mind is that the longer it takes him to figure out the putter and to start putting better, the more likely it is that those struggles seep into his long game. And he's not top 10ing because he's not dominating fields with his ball striking anymore.
How many events that he's won has he been like, he's gotten done and been like, man, imagine how many I would have won by if I would have putted good? Because there's got to be sometimes that he's putted very average and still won because it's so elite. So like I think it all kind of seeps, even when you can win and still think, man, imagine if I putted good. So
He
I
won
think
the
maybe
Players
he's
by 5 and gained 0.13 strokes per round putting. He was unbelievable tee to green. He gained 1.25 of a strokes each off the tee and around the green, and over 2 strokes with his irons that week. It's like, to your point, if he putted well, he could have won by 10.
Yeah, and I think he knows, and there's got to be a narrative of like maybe he just is going to be that good tee to green, and he's just that special tee to green, and he is just going to accept of where he is, as far as all that goes. And I'm glad you brought up Justin Thomas to go with it. I think that he was the one that I had a circle around if they played Sunday. I posted on Twitter a little bit about there's some guys that win before you tee off. And I think he had that mindset of if we play today, everybody else is going to beat themselves. And the way he's playing, he was the one that I thought probably won to play the most on Sunday.
Yeah, I think that's a good call for sure. One other guy that I want to talk about from Pebble this past week is Adam Scott. Basically, he got no attention coming into the week, and to some degree, that's understandable. It was his first PGA event of the season. His last 3 events were on the DP World Tour in November, December, and January. But man, the guy doesn't play a full schedule, and yet he just continues to play really solid golf almost every single time he tees it up, including some performances last year that would have been, good enough to potentially win this week. Like at the Wells Fargo, he finished 5th. That was a loaded event. He gained over 3 strokes per round, true strokes per round. This week, that type of performance could become a win. So I'm really curious to see how Adam Scott continues to play this week and moving forward. I think he's one of the most underrated players on tour right now. And it's interesting to note, too, because, with all this PGA and LIV discussion, I'm not sure there's a player that we were more surprised to see hang with the PGA Tour instead of going to LIV than Adam Scott. And maybe it's because he knew that he had more left in the tank than we all thought.
Front door.
Sorry, everybody's coming to the office. No, it's all the Australians, right? Coming. All the Australians going to LIV was a big deal. So I don't know if that's going to change what he does, but he is playing good. I don't know what he's going to do going forward, but when you drive it like that, how do you not compete every week?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this was one of the best events that he's had off the tee, and actually for a long time now, he has been a hell of a lot longer off the tee than I think people realize. When you think of Adam Scott, you think of the beautiful, perfect golf swing. You think of a great iron player. Well, for the last couple of years, he's actually been one of the longest players on tour. His driving accuracy has really struggled. I don't know if there's something to that. Like maybe he's made a major effort to become longer off the tee and was struggling with his accuracy as a result. Also, his approach play hasn't been quite as good as we remember it from his prime. But man, he's come out now in the first 2 events this season, or actually not the first 2 events that he's played, but his last DP World Tour event, he drove it really well and now gained over a stroke per round off the tee at Pebble. There was only 2 rounds because remember, one was at Spyglass, and then of course we didn't get the final round, but 2 really, really solid rounds off the tee from Adam Scott. So if his driving accuracy is now going to take a step forward, and again, it's a small sample. We don't know that it's going to, but the possibility certainly exists that it will. And if that happens, there's no telling just how competitive he can be this season.
And to your point, like if the driving accuracy thing, and I wish we knew more about this, but we used to play Scottsdale all the time in college, and the fairways are huge. It's a very typical TPC golf course. But the interesting thing about Scottsdale compared to even other tour events is they don't have the grandstands to save you in spots where other places do. You can hit it into the cactus and into the desert and have no shot. So there's a lot of that too.
Yeah. Final point about Pebble before we move on. What were your thoughts from Nick Dunlap's debut as a professional, finishes dead last, still makes $32,000 or something like that. So certainly a nice consolation prize, if you will. But what do you think are the thoughts running through his head right now? Like, is there any doubt that he made potentially the wrong decision turning pro? Or was it just, you know what, it's one event, it's the first event as a professional, move on and get back to the type of golf you can play?
Yeah, I think it's just a win hangover. I mean, everybody's going to say you had a week off, but you had to go home and make difficult decisions in that week, right? So it's not like he
And
just
have really difficult conversations with people.
with his teammates and his friends and his coach and like. So how do you, man? He's a kid too. He's a 19-year-old kid. I'm not worried about it. If we have this conversation sitting here next year and he's not contending, then I might say, hey, like, might be time to think about something. But I'm not going to worry about that for a long time.
Right. And I think the other point here is because he's in these designated events, he could finish dead last every time and still make like $250,000 this year, in which case, could that possibly be a bad decision? So
Yeah.
I'm with you. I think he's going to be fine. And I don't know if you've done any of the underdog best ball drafts, but after his win and particularly once the news broke that he was turning professional and was going to be in all these designated events, he started getting drafted in like the 6th, 7th round. He's pretty much going undrafted again. So I've been snatching him up in the last round of each of those drafts all week long, and I'm pretty happy with that decision. And
he proved
really like that exposure.
Yeah, he proved he can win. So if you can get somebody way down that can win a golf tournament, there's something to be said about that. The other thing is, I mean, if you wanted to dig too deep into this at a very young age, let's just talk about the course fit of where he won compared to where he played this week. Like, they're not the same.
Mm-hmm.
Is he in the field this week at Scottsdale?
I almost think not. No, he's not. I pretty much guarantee you he'll be at the Genesis.
Yeah, no, but I just would think like Scottsdale would be a little bit better fit for what I've seen out of him. You're getting a little bit more correlation this week. Mm-hmm. Obviously, a little bit harder off the tee, but that's only for the big miss. This place isn't that hard unless you have really big misses, in my opinion, or just what I know from playing it. But the fairways are big. Generally not overly difficult chipping. I know everybody's like all the runoffs and all that, but years past, everybody's like, oh, it's all Bermuda. It's usually all overseed. So you usually get really good lies around the greens. I haven't seen any pictures this year, but I assume it's overseed again this year.
I would think so. We can jump into the preview of Scottsdale now. And before we get into course fit, I want to start at the top with the fact that we get withdrawals from both Viktor Hovland and Xander Schauffele. The first thing that this does is create a massive gap between Scottie Scheffler and the second best player at the event. We have almost a full stroke difference between Scheffler and the second highest projected player in our expected strokes gained projections. It gives him one of the highest win probabilities that I've seen, 18.6%, 44% chance of a top 5 for Scottie, 58% chance of a top 10. I believe his actual odds for a top 10 are like minus 140 or something like that this week. Just enormous numbers from Scottie. Tiger Woods-like numbers from Scottie across the board. Where do you see him this week in terms of his chances to win? Because certainly the talent gap between he and the rest of the field is big enough to say he should win, but can you really win with a putter as cold as his?
I think you get a lot less correlation with putting this week. So, and he's won here 2 years in a row. If he won, I don't think anybody would be surprised if he won this week, right? I'm surprised more by the Hovland WD than I am the Xander WD. I don't know if you agree with that, but I was a little bit shocked that he decided to do that. And I could be wrong. I just didn't. It kind of came out of nowhere. You had good points about the Xander stuff with just the struggles and maybe trying to get back to playing better, but.
Yeah, so let's jump into their form a little bit, because there's an underlying question here. We haven't said it yet, but I think everyone is already thinking it is. Are either of these guys or both of these guys going to live, or are they just taking a week off to prep for Genesis? In Xander's case, he had this great week out at Torrey, with the exception of his putter on, I wanted to say Saturday and Sunday. It was Friday and Saturday, round 3, round 4 at Torrey. He should have won that golf tournament, but he putted horrendously down the stretch. Couldn't make anything those final 2 days, especially the last day. Was phenomenal tee to green, comes to Pebble, and has a similar struggle. Xander is one of the best putters on tour. So to suddenly be struggling so much like that, I think it makes sense to me why he would say, you know what, I need to just figure out whatever the heck is going on with my putter and go to the Genesis, knowing that I've got that straightened out and I can just, bounce back before this turns into a month-long struggle with the putter or something like that. So that does make sense. But at this time of season, you still have to ask that question. We're sandwiched between 2 designated events. So if both of these withdrawals are just that they're just taking the less important week off to prep for more important weeks, I won't be shocked. But especially in Hovland's case, I think we have to ask the question, because not only did he make this last-minute withdrawal, but he also fired a coach that helped him become arguably the best player in the world, certainly the best player in the world for the second half of last season, was unbelievable down the stretch. And most importantly of all, he took the greatest weakness of his game around the green play and turned it into something close to a strength, honestly. For most of the second half of last year, he was gaining quite a bit around the greens. It was one of the most surprising firings of a swing coach that I can remember ever in golf. That alone made me question, is he going? So then you get this very late withdrawal. I think you have to ask the question, or do you think it was just a reaction to some really unexpected struggles at the Pebble Beach Pro-Am?
I don't know. I think that what happened with all the short game stuff, like what it did is it gave him confidence to rely on his strengths of how well he could hit it. So now he's like, well, now I can be aggressive, because if I miss the green, I've still got a chance. I think that's where all the wins came from and why he played so good. That being said, is Liv done for the year? Would they, are they open to adding a name and firing? I don't know. This is another thing that I think that we don't have enough draw for Liv, is because we don't understand, right? Yeah. We know what we get. We get X amount of teams and X amount of players every week, and they're all going to go play 54-hole shotguns, and it's going to be a huge party. But what are we trying? What's their end game? What are they trying to do? Like, are they actively adding players? You can only have so many in a shotgun start. So, like, you're kind of running out of room for teams, right? So, is there a guy that, may get fired any given day? Be like, if Hovland comes, they just fire another guy and say, here's the couple million I promised you, and you're not playing anymore. Or like, I just don't know how that works. It's been very vague.
When Hovland WD'd, I saw Monday Q Info tweeted bad news for Pat Perez. So to your point, like, would that just bounce Pat Perez out of Liv? Who the hell knows?
Yeah,
but
that's what I'm saying. Like, nobody knows.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really weird dynamic in that sense. But man, so on the one hand, we do need to point out the fact that, like, Hovland has struggled so far this season, just 22nd at the Century, had a disastrous bunker shot at the Century, by the way. I don't know if you remember that, but had a phenomenal first 2 days, 65, 67 out of the gates, and then a 72 in round 3, in part because he blasted a bunker shot thin through the green. Penalty, made a huge number on the hole. It might have been a quad, if I recall correctly. Obviously a little bit ago now. But now this is the first event that he has played since. He was bad with his irons. He was horrendous around the greens at Pebble, and finished 58th. So definitely some concerns there for Hovland. I think it does make sense then that he would just want a week off, but I get back to the fact that, like, why the hell did he fire his coach? He's seeing much worse play now without him. And the only explanation that makes sense to me is for why he split with his coach is because his coach knew he was going to live. He didn't want to be a part of that decision, and they had to split their ways because of that. Outside of that, like I just don't understand why that decision would have been made. It's the only one that makes sense to me, and that's why I think the possibility of Hovland going to live is a little bit higher in my mind than Schauffele doing so.
And it seems that fits his personality better, right? I mean, just knowing what we know about Hovland, it just seems like the live scene to me like fits the way his mind is.
I don't know about that. I feel like he's one of those guys who, he's so happy-go-lucky, just a goofy guy, loves life, but at the end of the day, he's kind of a killer, and he wants to be the best in the world and prove that in the majors and all that stuff.
Yeah, I'm just saying the kind of that happy-go-lucky seems to be more the live mindset than the tour mindset. So, yeah, I don't know. It's funny.
I guess my point is, I think part of the reason why he's so happy-go-lucky is because he just enjoys competing so damn much and doesn't know what to do with all that fun he's having competing every week.
And he just, it's funny to me that we're talking about him, but and this is all, I think anybody that knows anything about golf, like nobody's going to talk about how bad Rory played. I mean, he played really poor, like bad shots, bad putting.
That's a great point. I should have included it in the recap portion because it was one of the most surprising collapses that I can ever recall seeing, in the sense that he was 6 under on day one, bogey free through either 13 or 14, was playing phenomenal golf, went birdie, 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 and then just lost it. And I can't remember an instance of a guy that good losing it that severely and just like at the flip of a switch in the middle of a round, right? It's not like he had a great Thursday and then an awful Friday. It was in the middle of his round, he forgot how to play golf.
And then he took an illegal drop and had to add 2 more and all of that. So, yeah, it was, and then he played terrible the rest of the week. Like, not good shots.
Putted horrendously on day 2. Horrendously.
And so, like, is that just a carrot? Like, do we just throw that out and forget about that? Which I mean, I think that's probably the right decision, is just not to worry about what happened. But yeah, I was really surprised. Obviously, we were paying a little bit more attention to him than maybe some others, so we kind of saw it more all unfold. But it was disappointing to watch, and yeah, he just wasn't very good.
By the way, in the Mayo Cup standings, the one and done contest for any new viewers, Justin and I are in this big giant like industry wide one and done contest throughout the entire season. We're doing an entry together, and we had Rory this past week. The winners on tour so far this year have been such surprise winners that basically no one is doing well. And what the site does is, like, throughout the event, whatever the player, if he's in first place, like even if it's on Thursday morning, they showed the updated hypothetical standings of if everything ended right now as is, this is the place you'd be in. When Rory was leading on like the 14th hole of the first day, we were in like 22nd place or something like that. So it shows that we have not started the season well. We have, I think, 2 top 20s and nothing better than that. We're still very much in it because no one's doing well at this point. So we're going to have to get together soon. But man, we've got a chance if we start to get hot anytime in the near future.
And just some context on the Rory pick, as we didn't talk about it much. If I have a chance to get the best player in the world at 1% owned, less than 2% owned when he's playing really well, I think that was the biggest deal for us. Mm-hmm. We kind of know where everybody else is going to use them, so we wanted to do something a little bit different. It didn't work out, but I still, looking back, it's like I guess Schauffele finished 9th, so that's our only top 10. But looking back at that, I even thought, man, he should have won that golf tournament. So like it hasn't worked because it's called golf, but it's not like I feel horrible about what we've done.
And we've been 100% correct about the ownership of our players. So that, I think that's the part that we have the most control over. If we just continue to do that, eventually the really good golfers that we're backing are going to play well when we need them to, and we'll be in good shape by the end of the season.
And we even called what we thought was going to happen with Scheffler, like as far as like, hey, let's try to get Rory against Scheffler when Scheffler still hasn't figured out his putting.
Yeah.
And then, it all kind of worked out, except for Rory just didn't play very good. So
Rory decided he had won the tournament on Thursday afternoon and went into coast mode, and all of a sudden he was 3 over par or something.
Yeah, it was not very fun to watch.
Wild stretch of holes that he had. I think there was a stretch where he was like 8 over in his last 8 or something like that. Just horrendous. You never in a million years see that from Rory, and yet it happened when we picked him. So maybe the lesson is whoever Justin and I take in one and done, run away from, because they're going to put themselves in contention and then become a 20 handicap for an hour or so.
And the running joke is like when we talk ourselves out of somebody and onto the other one, like I just go put a future on the other one, because that's what's going to happen. The one that we remove, I'm just going to go ahead and go bet on him somewhere. So
yeah, good call there as well. All right. Course fit for Scottsdale, I think, is an awesome model and a really fun discussion to have. We are going to put it up on the screen right now. You can see these major weights on both aspects of driving, expected driving distance and expected driving accuracy, and around the green play gets this huge weight. I think the reason why this is so interesting is because we've already talked about how we know that ball strikers historically have done well here, and players who aren't the best putters have done well here because of that emphasis on ball striking. But are you surprised at the emphasis on driving and short games over approach play?
No, because I think that you can make up for approach play with around the green stuff here. Mm-hmm. I think that, if you don't hit it in these wide fairways, you are making at least a bogey. And then to go even further from that, the better you drive it, the more opportunities you have for high leverage shots. Therefore, more opportunities you have to make birdie.
I think you nailed it there. I think this golf course comes down to the high leverage shots. And for those who haven't heard us talk about this, it's honestly, I think the first time we ever talked about the concept of high leverage shots was on this exact week a season ago, just for this golf course here at Scottsdale. A high leverage shot is when the difference between a good shot and a bad shot is a lot larger than on the typical golf shot. So think of, what's a good example?
Is it 15? I was going to say 15 the par 5 this week.
Yeah. I think that one certainly comes to mind for Scottsdale. But think of the 16th hole at Pebble Beach this past week on the first 2 days. If you can't picture the hole, it's fine. The thing you need to know is the pin was back right. It's a fairly easy tee shot, and the green slopes so heavily from back right to front left that the best shots that guys were hitting to that hole ended up like 20, 25 feet short left of the hole. And the worst shots were just in the front of the green, 50 feet away, something like that. So in both of those instances, the difference between a good shot and a bad shot, not that big, because the most likely outcome is you're just making par either way. Maybe the worst shots had a small chance at a bogey. Maybe the best shots had a small chance at a birdie. But for the most part, it was, you're just going to make par regardless. The tee shot on 18 at Pebble Beach is a phenomenal example of a high leverage shot. You get tee shots like Wyndham Clark hit, where all of a sudden he's now 218 yards out or something like that on a par 5. Good chance at eagle, great chance at birdie. And then you get tee shots like Xander Schauffele hit on day 1. Pulls it left in the water, retees, pulls it left in the water, has to retee again. The difference between a good shot and a bad shot on 18 at Pebble was at least 2 strokes, maybe close to 3 strokes there. So that's a high leverage shot, and you get a ton of those here at Scottsdale. The 15th hole you mentioned, the tee shot on 17. It's weird. Like the 16th hole gets all of the attention at Scottsdale, and rightfully so, because it's the only environment like it in the entire sport. But it's not the hole that determines the golf tournament. The ones that surround that hole are where the tournament is won and lost every season. And then you get just a bunch of high leverage shots throughout the entire course as well, where again, it's that the difference between good shots and bad shots make an enormous difference. And importantly, to your point, a lot of the time, like on the 15th hole, it's a long par 5. The green is almost an island. It might be exactly an island. And it's not so much how good is your second shot into the green. It's what position did you put yourself in off the tee. If you have 230 from the middle of the fairway, it becomes a fairly easy shot and you're almost definitely going to make birdie. If you're 260 out in the rough, Now you make the decision to go for the green. You might hit a good shot and still end up in the water or something like that. So I think you nailed it 100%. The reason why driving gets such a huge weight here is because it sets up all the high leverage shots where you just put yourself in great positions to make birdies and score, whereas a bad shot puts you in position where you're just hoping to make par.
Have you ever wondered what the field scoring average on 17 would be if everybody hit 5-iron sand wedge compared to everybody hitting driver?
Not so much, because I think we have that data from past seasons where it's almost like number 10 at Riviera, where it used to be the case that so much of the field laid up, and now because the data said don't do that, almost everybody goes for it.
Yeah, and the reason that I think it's different than theirs with the water left, and you can hit it right of that green and literally be just trying to get it on the green, not even trying to hit it by the hole. So it's a little bit different to me. I just think it's an interesting. And the other thing is, like with the data that we have and that's out there, you have to look at the names of the guys that are going for it, versus the names of the guys that are laying up, right? So everybody says they try to play to their strengths. I'm not sure everybody always knows what their strengths are.
That's a good point. Like whenever the graphic comes up of like, this is the scoring average of guys going for it, this is the scoring average of guys who didn't, like you can't just look at that, because the guys who didn't go for it are probably doing so because they know, well, if I do go for it, I'm not going to be able to have that same scoring average as those guys. I'm not as good off the tee. I'm not as long off the tee, that sort of thing. I certainly, like when you watch a broadcast, you will only hear the commentators talk about the fact that, the guys who lay up are the ones who trust their wedges. You don't hear them say it's the guys who know that they're not that good off the tee.
Yeah.
So they certainly leave out some necessary context, but I do think regardless, like that doesn't necessarily take any signal away from off the tee, right? Because if your point is that guys who aren't good off the tee shouldn't even be going for the green, that in and of itself is a reason why guys who are good off the tee would have a big advantage on the hole and on the course itself.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a lot of like those kind of force carries that are a huge deal here. That first par 5, you've got to hit it pretty far in the air to have a chance to go, because it's more of a cut the corner hole. What is it? It's 3, I think.
Yeah,
2 or 3. But yeah, it's definitely, it's just an interesting dynamic of this golf course. I used to be super against this place because I never understood why, and kind of falls into the TPC Craig Ranch where they play the Byron Nelson. Why do they play these TPC courses that are just easy, where the fairways are wide and you just hit a bunch of 7-irons with the exception of a few holes? I think now, as I've gotten older, I understand the dynamic of this place a little bit more than I do like a Craig Ranch, because this at least has a few high leverage shots, and maybe the fact that it seemed easy to me was because I hit it pretty straight. But the reason I didn't like it is because I had a bunch of 7-irons and not any wedges because I hit it pretty short. So, there's a dynamic of, taking what I do as a golfer and into the courses that I've played. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's a fun environment. Are they going to get a bunch of rain?
I'm not sure. That's a good question.
I just saw on that broadcast last week, they were talking about how that same storm may go through Phoenix. I don't know if that's true.
Oh, interesting. Let's see. Scottsdale, lots of rain on Wednesday. Then, some rain in the forecast Thursday morning, not a ton. Maybe 0.1 inches per hour for 4 hours or so. And then very clear Friday, cold though, both days, upper 40s, low 50s, even in the 30s Friday morning for some of the groups. And then a little bit rain of Saturday as well, clear on Sunday, but cold all week. So that's interesting.
Yeah,
maybe
it's not Phoenix weather.
Yeah. As far as around the green is concerned, I think this is definitely one of those golf courses where, typically when we see around the green spike like this, it's because we know that guys are going to have to scramble to save par a lot. You see that on the really difficult golf courses on tour, like at Bay Hill, at Sawgrass. You see a big emphasis on around the green play. Here, I think it's more because it's needed to score well, to make some birdies. Like number 17, for example, the tee shot sets up a very difficult pitch shot where if you hit a good one, you're going to have a very good chance for birdie. But the green complex itself is so difficult that it's not a guarantee that you're even, within 15 feet after the pitch shot. So there are a lot of holes like that where you're going to need to lean on your short game to make birdies. A couple shots come to mind, like Matsuyama has played well here in the past, and it just seems to own that chip shot on that hole, whether it's the front left pin, the back right pin. Koepka hold that chip shot on 17, I believe, from short right, just a phenomenal little spinner. So some shots that like immediately come to mind. I always like when they emphasize or reinforce what we're seeing from the data in the course fit model.
Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, it's a high leverage shot because you're trying to make a birdie too. And you can also hit that shot into the water. Like, it's not like we haven't seen that happen. It's so funny because
especially if you're not one of the best players on tour and you're just, there on vacation playing and you're like, oh my God, this is the one they make birdie on every time. I'm going to blade this in the water, no doubt.
Yeah. It's, every time I see that hole on TV, all I can think of is, I don't know if you remember Bob Menery, the comedian that always put the stuff. So he's the one that did all the Buffalo Wild Wings stuff forever. But like the place that he became famous was when he talked about Ollie Schneider-Jans and Dustin Johnson on 17. And like, for some reason, that's all I can think of every time. So if you've never seen that, it's pretty funny. But yeah. It's fun. I just like this week in general because I think it's fun. I think the players like it because it does have a more relaxed feel. Mm-hmm. Which, once again, is this a week where Liv was like, "Hey, we want more weeks like that and less serious weeks"?
Does the energy of the 16th hole? Do you think we're talking about all these high leverage shots surrounding the 16th hole and how they can make or break the tournament for these players? Do you think the energy of the 16th provides this like necessary or relieving distraction from all of those high pressure, high leverage shots at the end of the round?
Maybe. I mean, people are still nervous. Like, everybody wants to look good in front of others. Like, and you feel like you've got all eyes on you there. I think they did. I think that the people that run that golf tournament did an awesome job taking their worst golf hole and making it an icon.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And it works so perfectly too, because not only is it probably the worst just straight up golf hole on the course, but it's also this like very necessary break from the high leverage shots. Like, you don't want high leverage shot after high leverage shot after high leverage shot. You want them to be somewhat spread out, and yet you're not spreading them out with boredom in this instance. You're spreading them out with just this like completely different type of energy and completely different type of way to excite the players and keep them fully engaged.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's really fun to watch. Yeah, they just have done a good job. This is one of the few tournaments that I feel like the people that run it have really, really done what's best for them. And I think it's a good week for the players. Like I said, that was the surprise by the Hovland WD, because I always got the feeling that he really enjoyed it here, which is weird to me that the winners that you get here, the two that come to mind, right, are your Scheffler and Matsuyama. They're probably two of the calmest, like, least partying type that you have. So is there a correlation of, hey, these guys just go out there and take care of business and don't fall into the trap of what everybody else is doing, whereas some of the other players truly just try to have more fun with it?
Yeah, that's potentially an interesting question to look into. I think one other aspect of it is the idea, like, to your point, we know that the players really enjoy coming here, because if you looked at the fields last season in basically any event that was sandwiched between designated events, or not even just sandwiched, but like within a month of maybe 3 designated events, if you had one non-designated event and you looked at the field, you saw some pretty ugly names, really, really weak fields. This one, sandwiched between designated events, is extremely strong. Even when you take out Schauffele and Hovland, you still get just a large crowd of really solid golfers. So I'm super excited for this week. I wish to some degree that it was a designated event, not in the sense that, I love the fact that there's actually a cut here, but I do wish we had some of the other best players in the world, just because I think it's fun to watch the best players in the world attack all of these high leverage shots and just kind of make them look like nothing at times. And then also even the best in the world get humbled by the high leverage shots from time to time.
For sure. And I think there's got to be a plan of making this a signature event in the future, kind of like they agreed to do with Pebble this year. So I don't know. That could be wrong. But.
Yeah, we had it last year. I'm sure it'll be some kind of rotation, and it'll earn that designated status quite often, I'm sure. We mentioned course fit is like somewhat all about driving and around the green play. Iron play and putting still important. They're still, about as important or as predictive, I should say, this week as they are any other week on tour. It's the average week on tour. But if there's this huge emphasis on driving, both aspects, distance and accuracy, and short game, who comes to mind as like a course fit specialist, someone that will maybe do better in the long run on this golf course than they will the average place on tour?
I mean, I think that we've kind of seen that out of all the places, the same names kind of show up and always play good here. Matsuyama and Scheffler obviously come to mind immediately. I think everybody this week is gonna focus in on Justin Thomas, trending, everything trending, and then is played good here. So that's where I think everybody's gonna start. I could be wrong. That's just the feel that I get. It's an interesting week. I'm pretty excited about where everybody goes and where ownership goes. To pay up to Scheffler, or do they kind of build a more even lineup and that kind of deal?
Scheffler's an interesting one because on the one hand, off the tee, he's probably the best in the world now, just so much more accurate than anybody else off the tee. And we know he has a world-class short game. We know he's the iron play for all these high leverage shots. Like, I think one of the reasons why you do still want a really strong iron player is just because when those high leverage shots come, you want them to be able to have the potential to dominate those high leverage shots with their irons and make birdie or eagle where others are, hitting it into the water. So maybe the point there is that like good iron players have a higher ceiling than others here because of what they can do on those high leverage shots. So it's not surprising to see that Scotty has won back to back because he's a good fit. But do you think that his ownership or his expectation in the market is going to be a little bit too high this week because people will look at that and say, oh, there's something about this golf course, when in reality, maybe he just won here in the last 2 years because in the last 2 years, he's been the best player in the world.
Yeah. And I mean, the flip side of that is like he just finished sixth. Like if he figures out his putting, is he still the best player in the world right now? So there's it's a great question. I think that he is still the best player in the world. And so on a course that he's won at before, now if he struggles a little bit this week on the greens, I think that it'll get in his own head a little bit more than maybe other weeks because he's always kind of come here and figured it out.
What do you think I have for his projected DFS ownership at the moment? Bearing in mind, again, that there were two guys in the price range, Hovland and Schauffele, who were maybe supposed to take some of that ownership from him, and they're not there anymore. So now he's just going to soak up all of it.
I'm going to guess it's right around 20%. I'm guessing by the question that's way low. So like, I don't think you would have asked the question if that would have been right. So obviously it's got to be pretty high. I've
got him at 40% in MME right now and 46% in single entries. Don't know if we'll finish the week like that, but the interesting thing is I think it had to be that high for me to consider not playing him. If he was 35%, I think he would have been my first click.
Yeah. But I mean, that's obnoxious percentage. But the problem is, like, we've talked about this all the time. At what point do you just eat chalk and say, okay, I'm going to start here and build, unless you think you can leverage everywhere else by getting enough of those middle guys. But if you've got a guy in the bottom, and I haven't really gone through pricing yet, but if you've got a guy that's, mid to upper 60s or, low 7s that you're like, I want to build around this guy, you can kind of eat the chalk with Scheffler and then go elsewhere.
Yeah. And for context, like we have him at 44% to finish in the top 5 or better. and no one else is at 20% for that. So he's just that much better than everybody else. In terms of like actual course fit specialists, I'm not sure that he qualifies because think about how we define course fit specialist, someone who projects a lot better at this course than they would the average golf course. Well, Scotty's always going to project really well. Guys that come to mind, Benny On, awesome off the tee, awesome with his short game, obviously not the best putter. Minwoo Lee, another guy, great off the tee, super long off the tee, potentially the best short game in the world. I'm not sure people realize just how damn good he is around the greens. And he's a good putter, but his actual like biggest weakness is iron play. It's not that iron play isn't important here. It's just that maybe he drives the ball so well that he's able to take like more conservative lines with his iron play. And there's also, I think, an element here of when you have all these high leverage shots, course management becomes really important, making sure you're not making bad decisions. And where course management really shows some signal is in driving accuracy and in around the green play. Minwoo Lee, his around the green play at least shows he potentially can manage his way around this golf course, can understand how his iron play works against him and say, you know what, I'm just not going to let that beat me this week. I'm great off the tee. I'm great on and around the greens. All I have to do with my irons this week to contend is not hit myself out of the golf tournament with them. So maybe he can be
which is easier said than done. That's easier said than done.
Yeah. Like there's nothing you can do if you're 200 out on let's say you're 220 out on number 15, that Island Green, you're going to go for it. 100%.
You're going to try to hit a 4 or 5 iron right in the middle of the green. Yeah.
And he still might everybody's going to try to do the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
but yeah, I think certainly he's got a chance to be great this week. And that could just be in the sense that like, you know, even though he's not a good iron player, it's not like he can't have a good week with his irons every now and then. And so if he has the spike week this week, he's so damn good at everything else that matters here that could just like that one thing could put him in contention. Whereas other weeks he might need a little bit more help than just having a pretty good iron week. Last guy that I really want to bring up, much more of an under the radar type target, Sunghyun Kim, SH Kim, as he goes by, depending on where you're looking. I feel like some broadcasts, they call him SH Kim, then like the next week he's Sunghyun Kim. I don't know why there's not more consistency there, but he's somebody really good off the tee, excellent with his around the green play. He's basically like a poor man's Minwoo Lee. They're almost the same player. I think Minwoo is a better putter, but it might even be the better driver, at least more accurate off the tee. He doesn't have the length that Minwoo has, but very similar strokes gain profiles in the sense that they're great off the tee, excellent around the green, and really, really losing strokes to the field in the average week with their iron play. So potentially another guy under the radar, really contrarian DraftKings play, only $6,500. So he could be a key to, like you mentioned, look, if you've got a cheap contrarian guy that's going to give you all that differentiation, it becomes a lot easier to play Scotty Scheffler. So Kim might be the key to playing Scotty Scheffler well this week on DraftKings.
Yeah, and the non-stats version of me, one of the guys that I've talked about a lot in events like this, that is Eckroat. I think he has a good week this week. So,
was this the Eckroat call from you last year?
No, it was Craig Ranch. It was here, so I knew but I don't know, like if you dug into your notes, how much correlation you would see between Craig Ranch and here and this week. But they're both TPC courses. They're both under that. So that they were both built with the same intentions. So I think he plays good again this week.
I think that's a good call. I also want to look at what was the course fit model for the Byron Nelson last year. At Craig Ranch, we had a phenomenal week. Around the green play was up, off the tee, played a big role. Approach had a slightly higher weight than this week, but then putting was also kind of neutral. We have a better process for the course fit model this year. So it'll be interesting to see what we get for Craig Ranch, but definitely some similarities there in the course fit model, the emphasis around the green play, among other things. I think that'll pretty much cover everything except for our one and done decision. So let's see what we got this week. It sounded ahead of time when we talked a little bit. It sounds like we're on similar path again. So why don't you start us off with your first nominee for who we'll use in one and done this week?
So my first thought was Jordan Spieth, and I know that, and it was weird you talked about maybe that he was going to be too high owned, whereas I thought that was a little bit more contrarian in where he stands and everything, because my reason is, if you look at the last couple of weeks, he's obviously played good here before. I don't know that he's ever won here, but he's hitting the ball tremendously well, probably better than maybe ever. He's just really struggled with putting, and from your course fit that we just looked at, it's what matters the least. So that was my first initial thought. I know we've talked a little bit more about it, which, we can get behind other guys. But yeah, I think that I think at this point I want a guy with some win equity, and I think he provides that.
He definitely does. He's third in our win odds this week. If it's not Minwoo Lee, that's the best in the field with short game. It's a short list. Hideki Matsuyama, Benny On, Scotty Scheffler, JT, Jordan Spieth, I think, are the names that are competing for the best short game in this field, potentially also in the entire world. So Spieth really fits that. Like Adam Scott, he's coming off a fantastic driving week. We certainly love to see that. Driving is the one stat where we can really take a lot from just the previous week, whereas the other stats, you don't want to look too much at the previous week. You want to group them in with like the last month or the last 40 rounds, something like that. Off the tee, there's some real signal in just what did he do most recently. So like to see that from Spieth. And to your point, like the win equity, the guy, he hasn't won a ton lately, but we do know from his past that he knows how to get the job done and win once those high leverage shots come around on Sunday. So I definitely like that call. I think he's probably second on my list behind Adam Scott. And one of the reasons why I like Adam Scott this week for one and done is I think he's the most likely guy to be literally 1% owned in one and done, where just nobody else is using him. He's second in our expected strokes gained model this week. We talked about how great he's been off the tee lately. One of the longest players on tour. Don't think people realize that. Certainly one of the longest in this field. The only guys who are like very clearly longer than him, Minwoo Lee, Benny On, maybe a handful of others, but he's up there in distance here in this field. He's been more accurate off the tee of late. His iron play has been a little bit improved, and both on and around the greens, he's just solid. So solid all around. I think he's one of the smarter players on tour, so I like his chances to just manage his way around this golf course pretty well. I like pretty much everything about him.
Yeah, and I mean, I understand. Like, I can get behind Adam Scott for sure, especially the way he's driving it. Obviously, we talk about that so much, so I'm not going to beat a dead horse with that. My concern is the win. At this point, is do we think that if it got down to it, would he have a chance to close it out on Sunday? I think yes. I think he has the ability to do it. I think you had a good point of like him not going to live. Like, he still thinks he has a lot more in the tank here on the PGA Tour. So that's encouraging, and to see the improvement. My biggest issue is like how good he's driving it, and we still haven't really talked about him having a chance to win lately.
So there are a couple ways I can take this. The first is, I think the question of can he win is a really good one. And I think there are a couple ways that we can answer this. The first is, do we think that he has the stones to do it if he's in contention on the stretch? I don't really have any question there. I'm guessing you don't either. No. I think the second way you can answer this is looking at his past performances. Has he shown a ceiling that is good enough to win in a field like this? And I think the answer is yes. So I mentioned earlier, like he had that performance at the Wells Fargo that was a T5 in a designated event last year. With that performance, he would have a chance to win this week. It probably wouldn't be good enough to win, but it certainly might win. And just because he hasn't done better than that plus 3.1 true strokes gained performance doesn't mean he can't. But I'm seeing enough of the spikes. He's one of the actually higher volatility guys in event-to-event standard deviation in the field. So I do think that the ceiling's there. I think that the perception that he can't win is part of why he's going to be as low owned as he is. I think he'll be a pretty popular DFS play, but a really unpopular one and done play. And I think that perception is wrong. He hasn't played a ton over the last couple of years, right? So I think that's another reason why we haven't seen him contend as much, is because he hasn't given himself as many opportunities. But some really strong finishes from him in some really strong fields, some difficult golf courses on some golf courses that have high leverage shots like this. So I think he's just a really strong play all around. I don't think he has the win equity that Jordan Spieth has, but I think he's going to be so much less owned that I give the narrow edge to Scott.
Yeah, and like I said, that's a great place for us. I mean, that's kind of why we have this discussion, is to go back and forth. And then, we're talking about too, I'm going to let you bring up, I'm pretty positive who you're going to bring up for your second one, which I'm 100% behind. The other one that I briefly mentioned is Sam Burns.
Mm-hmm.
The reason is, once again, win equity. And although he fits kind of the opposite of the model, his putter is so good right now to get him on perfect greens. And he kind of looks like the Sam Burns that we thought we were going to get for an extended period of time that we never really did. So if he hit, it's a big if, but if he plays the high leverage holes well and continues to putt like he's done week in and week out, I love the chances of him winning here.
I feel like we sometimes beat a dead horse on Burns. So apologies to our listeners who have heard this 100 times already, but the thing about Burns more than any other player on tour is I think he has this like very specific way in which he plays well and contends, where almost every single time he's in contention, he's there because he's been great with his irons and great with the putter that week. You can't really say that about any other player. Like there are guys who they're going to dominate one event and contend because they were great tee to green, didn't putt that well. The next time they're in contention, it's because they putted extremely well. With Burns, almost every single time, he was great with his irons and he was great with the putter. And last week at Pebble, he was great with both. So I agree with everything you said. Honestly, it's that he's not a great course fit in the long run, but in terms of what we want to be seeing from him right before an event, to think that he's got a great chance to win, we're seeing right now. So I like this call. I am tempted to say we want to save him anyway for an event that it's all about distance off the tee and putting prowess or something like that. But I could probably be talked into Burns just because what we're seeing from his game right now is exactly what we want to be seeing. As you said, it's like we're seeing 2022 Burns again. But the other thing is, if we're right about that, then there's a good chance that he's 22 Burns for all of 2024, in which case we'll have some other chances to use him.
And I agree. If we believe in long-term Sam Burns, then we don't use him this week, right? That's kind of the way that I look at this. But do we also know that we can get a world-class player that may not be a world-class player in 6 months?
That's also true. It's also true. So yeah, I think he has to be in the discussion. I think we have three really, really good candidates right there. So I'm almost tempted to not even give a fourth. I will say I think we should give some consideration to Min-Woo Lee just because I think he has a phenomenal ceiling. I don't think he will be super owned in one and done this week. I love his fit for the golf course. I have a similar hiccup with him though, which is just a month from now, we might be viewing Min-Woo Lee as one of the better players in the world. And we have plenty of golf courses because his strokes game profile is so severe, where he's one of the longest, if not the longest players on tour, one of the best, if not the best short games on tour, and then one of the worst iron players among the best players in the world. You're going to have many weeks where he's a course fit specialist and many weeks where he's not. So I wouldn't feel too bad about passing up this opportunity to get him as a course fit specialist, because we're going to get plenty of opportunities to do that with him. So I like the call, but I'm also happy to say, you know what, it's probably going to be Burns, Spieth, or Adam Scott.
Yeah, and anybody that listened last year knows that I absolutely love Min-Woo Lee. Min-Woo Lee, I think he's going to be one of the best players in the world going forward. I mean, I kind of came onto him at the Players last year, and that's where the first his name came up, and I think he was the first round leader and played really well. So that's kind of I think that he is one of the most talented players out there, like pure physical ability talent. So, but I agree. I think that he might be one that we could see ourselves wishing we would have waited on just to kind of round into form, maybe even a little better and figure things out a little bit more.
Well, we have been talking for an hour and a half. I don't know if you've noticed that time has flown here. We made the very purposeful decision to really focus this week on the PGA Tour and professional golf landscape as a whole, and not just talk about this week from a betting and DFS perspective, but really talk about golf. But the Pro v Pros now, pros talking pro golf, something like that. And it turns out we had plenty to say. So I doubt that most episodes in the future are going to be 90 minutes long like this one, but also don't want to cap ourselves because we know that we can talk about golf all day long together. Hopefully you guys really enjoyed this one, and hopefully you enjoy this kind of move towards more just talking about golf in general and the things that are on our minds about the sport that we all love so much. So thank you guys for tuning in, and we will catch you next time.